I had always dreamed of looking perfect, flawless, like the women in magazines. But I never thought chasing perfection would nearly cost me my life. My plastic surgeon wasn't just a doctor. He was something else entirely. Evil. And I didn't realize it until it was almost too late. I had been insecure about my face for as long as I could remember. A slightly crooked nose, uneven cheekbones, and those nagging bags under my eyes. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw 1,000 reasons to change. So, when I stumbled across Dr. Vincent Kane's glowing reviews online, it felt like fate. They called him a magician, a man who could make anyone look like their best self. I mean, people wrote testimonials about how he changed their lives. It was hard not to be drawn. Rachel explains how she saved up for years to afford the surgery. The consultation felt like stepping into another. His clinic was immaculate, sterile, and had that faint, clinical smell of everything about it screamed perfection. Just like him, Dr. Kane was charming, confident, and had this aura about him, like he could see right through. He didn't look. He studied. Dr. Kane's demeanor immediately puts Rachel on edge. He asks probing questions about her life, not just her appearance, as though he's trying to understand more about her than he should. He had this way of tilting his head when he spoke, as if he was already imagining the new version of you. He said, "Rachel, you have so much potential, you're beautiful, but with just a few tweaks, you could be unforgettable." And stupidly, I believe. The surgery day arrives. Rachel describes her nervous anticipation as she's prepped for the procedure. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia kicked in was Dr. Kane leaning over me, his gloved hand gently brushing my hair back. "Trust me," he whispered. "You'll thank me later." And then, darkness. When she wakes up, everything seems fine at first. The surgery as a success. Her reflection is stunning. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, I felt it was like he had sculpted away every flaw. But then, the compliments started feeling off. The nurse said, "You look just like her." Her? Who was? In the following days, Rachel notices strange things. Her scars heal unusually fast, almost too fast, and there are subtle changes in her face she doesn't remember requesting, like the shape of her jawline or the curve of her lips. It felt like I wasn't just improved. I was someone else. My own reflection started to feel foreign, like a mask I was wearing instead of my real face. She returns to the clinic to ask about the changes. Dr. Kane is eerily. He said, "Sometimes the body adapts. It's all part of the process." But his eyes said something else. He wasn't just calm, he was enjoying this, like he knew something I did. Rachel's unease grows when she starts receiving odd messages on social media from strangers. One message stood out. It just said, "You remind me of her." No name, no contact. I tried to ignore it, but then I noticed the stares, people looking at me like they knew me, like I was someone else entirely. One night, Rachel catches her reflection in the mirror and feels a deep sense of it was still my face, but there was something wrong, something I couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just cosmetic, it felt deeper, like a piece of me was missing. Rachel recalls her follow-up appointment with Dr. Kane. She decides to confront him about the changes and the unsettling feelings she's. When I asked him if he'd done anything beyond what I requested, he smiled a slow, deliberate smile and said, "Rachel, trust me. What I've done for you is extraordinary. You'll see." As she leaves his office, she notices a photo on his desk. It's of a woman who looks strikingly similar to her, but not quite the same. The hair was different, the eye, but the resemblance was undeniable. I asked him who she was, and his face darkened. He said, "A former patient. Nothing for you to worry about." But his tone told me it was everything I should worry about. Rachel realizes she's stepped into something far darker than she ever imagined. Thank you for watching. If you're fascinated by the hidden truths of history and the untold stories of crime and mystery, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with fellow history crime buffs and let us know in the comments which historical crime or mystery you'd like us to uncover. Together, let's explore the scales of history, one story at a time. I didn't realize the full extent of what was happening until I started digging deeper. What I uncovered about Dr. Vincent Kane would turn my entire world upside down, and it all began with the scars on my face. Rachel narrates her growing paranoia and unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with me. My reflection didn't feel like mine anymore. The subtle changes in my face haunted me, but what scared me the most was how fast the scars were disappearing. It wasn't normal. By the second week, they were nearly invisible, as though the surgery had happened months ago. I knew I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them by sitting around. Rachel decides to dig into Dr. Kane's past. She searches for reviews, patient testimonials, anything that might explain what's happening to her. At first, every review praised him as a miracle worker. 5 stars, no complaints. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized something was missing. His long-term patient. There were almost no reviews from people who'd seen him more than a year ago. It was like they'd all vanished. Her search leads her to an online forum for plastic surgery horror stories. I posted anonymously, describing my experience without mentioning Dr. Kane's name. Within hours, I received a private message from someone named Jenna. Her message was chilling. "I think I know who you're talking about. Can we talk?" Rachel describes her phone call with, "She told me she had been one of Dr. Kane's patients 5 years ago. She'd gone in for a simple nose job, but when she woke up, her face looked different. She said it was subtle, but she felt like she was being turned into someone else. When she confronted him, he dismissed her concerns, just like he did with." But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You need to be careful. People like us, we don't just walk away." Jenna warns Rachel about patients who tried to expose Dr. Kane and mysteriously disappeared. She said, "There's a reason you don't see long-term reviews. His patients either stay quiet or they vanish. Don't try." Determined to find proof, Rachel digs further into Dr. Kane's patient record. I remembered the photo on his desk, the woman who looked like me. I couldn't get her face out of my mind. Who was she? Why did she look like me? And why was he so secretive about? I decided to take a chance. I called the clinic pretending to be a journalist writing an article about successful plastic surgeries. The receptionist mentioned something interesting. Dr. Kane used to have a gallery of patient photos on his website, but it had been removed years ago. That's when I knew I was on to. Rachel uses an internet archive tool to find an old version of his website. What I saw made my stomach drop. The gallery was filled with faces, all women. And the scariest part, they all looked the same. Different ages, different features, but the same underlying face. It was like he was recreating the same person over and over again. I knew confronting Dr. Kane was dangerous, but I wasn't prepared for how much worse it could get. That smile he gave me, one that sent chills down my spine, wasn't the smile of a man caught off guard. It was the smile of someone who had planned everything to the last detail. What I thought was paranoia was just the tip of the iceberg. Dr. Kane had been playing a long, twisted, and I was trapped right in the middle of. Rachel narrates her escape from Dr. Kane's office after his chilling response about Sophia. I didn't wait for another word. I stood up, mumbled some excuse about needing to go, and practically ran out of his office. My hands were shaking as I fumbled to open my car door. And when I finally sat inside, I couldn't breathe. His words kept repeating in my head. "You are my masterpiece." What did he mean by that? What did he do to? Rachel begins to notice changes in her body, subtle at first, but increasingly. Over the next few days, things started to get strange. My skin felt tighter, almost unnatural, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I could swear my cheekbones looked higher, my jawline sharper. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt less like myself. And then I found the bruises. She discovers faint bruises on her body, in places she hadn't injured. They were small, almost like pinpricks, but they were there on my arms, my neck, even my lower back. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then, one night, I woke up to something that made my blood run cold. Rachel recounts a terrifying experience that solidifies her suspicion. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling a sharp, stabbing pain in my leg. When I pulled back the covers, I saw a small, fresh incision like I'd been cut with a scalpel. My first thought was to call 911, but then I saw the tiny camera hidden in the corner of my room, blinking red. Someone had been watching me. He had been watching. This revelation pushes Rachel into full-blown panic. I tore through my apartment, looking for more cameras, more signs that someone had been in my space. I found 3 more, one in the bathroom, one in the kitchen, and one pointed directly at my bed. I felt violated, exposed. And the worst part? I knew exactly who was behind it. Desperate for answers, Rachel decides to break into Dr. Kane's private office. I couldn't go to the police. Who would believe me? I had no proof, no evidence, just my gut instinct and a growing list of nightmares. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the clinic, late at night, when I knew no one would be there. If he had files, records, anything that could explain what he'd done to me, I was going to find them. She describes sneaking into the clinic and discovering a hidden room behind Dr. Kane's office. It wasn't easy. The door was locked, of course, but I found a set of keys in his desk drawer. When I opened that door, my heart nearly stopped. The room was filled with patient records, photos, medical charts, every person he'd ever worked on. And then I saw it. A wall covered in photos of me. Some of them were from before the surgery, but others were from my apartment. He'd been watching me long before I ever stepped foot in his clinic. Rachel finds something even more disturbing. Jars filled with what appear to be preserved human tissue. In the center of the room, there was a shelf lined with glass jars. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. Each jar had a label with a patient's name, and inside were pieces of skin, bone, even hair. It was like he was collecting us, keeping pieces of us as trophies. And then I saw the jar with my name on it. She realizes the truth about Dr. Kane's agenda. He isn't just obsessed with recreating Sophia Wright. He's using his patients as experiments, harvesting parts of them to build his masterpiece. This wasn't just about Sophia. He was trying to create something bigger, something more horrifying, and I was his latest victim. Rachel hears a noise behind her and narrowly escapes being caught. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt the cold, sharp presence of someone standing behind me. I turned just in time to see him, his face calm, almost amused. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, his voice eerily calm. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I shoved past him and ran, clutching one of the patient files as proof. But as I sprinted down the hallway, I heard him call out, "You can't run from this, Rachel. You belong to me now." I was running for my life. The halls of the clinic felt like they were closing in on me, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting long, eerie shadows. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps, calm, deliberate, as if he knew there was no escape. Dr. Kane wasn't chasing me in a panic. No, he was hunting me, like a predator, toying with its prey. Rachel describes the chaos as she flees the clinic, clutching the stolen patient file. My breathing was ragged, my chest burning, but I didn't dare slow down. I clutched the file against my chest like a lifeline, knowing it was the only proof I had of his twisted experiments. Every time I glanced back, I could see his silhouette, moving steadily closer, his calmness somehow more terrifying than if he'd been running. It was like he knew he'd catch me eventually. The chase spills out into the streets. I burst out of the clinic's side door and into the cold night air, my feet pounding against the pavement. The street was deserted. The only sound my own panicked gasps and the steady click of his shoes behind. I screamed for help, but no one came. The city felt empty, like a stage set designed just for this night. Rachel spots a cab and tries to flag it down, but Dr. Kane cuts her off. I saw the headlights of a cab in the distance and ran toward it, waving my arms like a lunatic. But just as it slowed down, Dr. Kane stepped into the street, his hand raised. The driver must have thought he was calm and in control, because they drove right past me and stopped for him instead. I couldn't believe he had the power to manipulate everyone around him, even strangers. Rachel hides in a nearby alley, trying to catch her breath and come up with a... I ducked into an alley, pressing my back against the cold brick wall, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I clutched the file tighter, my hands trembling as I flipped through its page. The names, the photos, the horrifying details, it was all there. And then I saw the last page. My name, my face, my body, marked up with notes about what he'd done and what he still planned. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just a game to him, it was an obsession. Dr. Kane corners Rachel, but she manages to escape. Before I could move, I heard his voice, calm, unbothered. "You can't hide, Rachel. This city belongs to me." His footsteps echoed down the alley, slow and methodical. There was nowhere to go but up. I spotted a fire escape and scrambled onto it, climbing as fast as I could. My hands slipped on the cold metal, but I didn't. Below me, I could hear him laughing, a low, sinister chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. Rachel makes it to the rooftop and jumps to an adjacent. When I reached the rooftop, I didn't think. I just ran. The gap between the buildings was wide, but I didn't care. I leaped, my heart stopping midair, and landed hard on the other side, rolling to avoid breaking my legs. When I looked back, I saw him standing at the edge, watching me. He didn't fall, he just smiled. That same chilling smile that told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Rachel finds temporary safety, but knows the battle is far. I didn't stop running until I was miles away, my lungs burning and my legs ready to give out. I found a 24-hour diner, slipped into the bathroom, and locked the door behind. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the terrified woman looking back. Dr. Kane wasn't just after me, he was everywhere, and no matter where I went, I knew he would find. But now, I had something he didn't expect. The truth. And I was going to use it to bring him down. I thought I had escaped him. I thought, for one fleeting moment, that I had won. But I underestimated just how deep his reach went. Dr. Kane wasn't just a man. He was a foresee shadow that loomed over every step I took, every decision I made. And now, I was about to face him one last time. Rachel decides to use the stolen patient file to expose Dr. With the file in hand, I knew I had what I needed to bring him down. The names, the surgeries, the grotesque details of his so-called art. This was more than proof. It was a... But how could I wield it when I couldn't trust anyone? The police? The media? He had them all wrapped around his finger. I had no choice but to confront him directly to make him answer for everything he'd done. Rachel lures Dr. Kane to a public place, knowing he thrives in secret. I arranged to meet him in the one place I knew he couldn't control, the rooftop of a downtown parking garage, surrounded by city lights and the hum of distant traffic. I sent him an anonymous message, attaching one of the photos from the file. He didn't reply, but I knew he'd come. He couldn't resist the challenge. Dr. Kane arrives, his calm demeanor masking his true intent. He appeared as if out of nowhere, stepping out of the shadows like he owned them. His suit was immaculate, his expression calm, almost amused. "Rachel," he said, his voice dripping with mock. "I have to admit, you've been quite the challenge. But it's time to end this game." I stood my ground, holding up the file. "This ends when the world knows who you really are." He laughed, a chilling, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "Do you think anyone will believe? Do you think anyone will care?" A struggle ensues, pushing Rachel to her limit. As he stepped closer, I felt the weight of his presence, the suffocating aura of control he carried everywhere he went. But I didn't back down. I confronted him, demanding answers, pushing him to admit his crimes. And for a moment, I saw something crack in his perfect facade, a flash of anger, of fear. That's when he lunged. The files scattered across the rooftop, pages fluttering in the wind. He was strong, far stronger than I expected, but I fought back with everything I had. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person he had hurt, every life he had destroyed. Rachel turns the tables, delivering the final blow to Dr. Kane's. In the chaos, I grabbed one of the fallen Pegasa photograph of one of his victims and shoved it in his face. "Look at her," I screamed. "You did this. You destroyed her life. And now you'll pay for it." For the first time, he hesitated. His grip loosened, his expression faltered. That hesitation was all I needed. I pushed him back, sending him sprawling onto the hard concrete. The file was scattered, yes, but I had memorized every detail. And with one final glance at his defeated figure, I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the reality of his unraveling empire. Rachel ensures the truth is revealed, bringing the story to its conclusion. The next morning, the file was in the hands of a journalist who wasn't under Kane's influence. The story broke like a tidal wave, exposing everything. Dr. Kane was arrested, his clinic shut down, and his victims finally given a voice. As for me, I moved far away, leaving the nightmare behind. But I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he realized he'd lost not just to me, but to the truth. That's the thing about monsters like him. They think they're untouchable, invincible. But even the most perfect facade can crumble under the weight of justice. I survived. Barely. But I know there are more like him out there, people who hide their evil behind masks of perfection. And I'll never stop looking over my shoulder, wondering if one day, one of them will come for me again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let us know in the comments which historical crime or mystery you'd like us to uncover next. Together, let's explore the scales of history, one story at a time. Do you think people like Dr. Kane are born evil, or do their actions stem from something deeper in their past? And if you had been in Rachel's shoes, would you have confronted him or walked away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.